making a claim right at this point. I need to make you aware as to why we are here. Yesterday, you will know that the Finance MEC, Barbara Creasy, presented the Gauteng provincial budget to the legislature. And so the importance of today's gathering is about us unpacking that budget, key priority areas for the provincial government. And I don't need to tell you the importance of the Gauteng economy in as far as its contribution to the GDP. Does anyone here know how much it contributes to the GDP? Just a quick. Okay, I'm not going to do that. All right, let me do this. Let me at this stage also make this important announcement that this particular event is being broadcast on ENCA as we speak. So we are live on ENCA. And so at this point, I'd like to invite the MEC of Finance, Barbara Creasy, who is going to make a few introductory remarks before she invites to the podium the Premier of the province, David Makura. Premier.
Thank you very much, Collie. And the answer to the trick question is 34.5. It contributes to the South African economy. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Allow me to greet Premier Makura, Professor Klein, and our fellow panelists, and of course all of you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Well, yesterday, as you know, we tabled a budget of 132.4 billion in the provincial legislature. 8 out of every 10 rand that we will spend goes on social services, and you can see that human settlements and transport are the other big budget items. I think that the difficulty in crafting this budget is that 1 in 4 South Africans now live in Gauteng. Our education system has 2.3 million learners. 20 million people visit our health facilities every year. And so there has been tremendous pressure on all of our social services. The way in which we've managed to cope with this pressure is by raising own revenue, and we're very pleased that over the last 5 years we've managed to raise in excess of 20 billion rand in own revenue. So you would see yesterday that the budget I tabled increased from last year by 9 billion rand. 7 billion of that is money that we have raised ourselves. And it's really what is allowing us to continue to employ teachers, nurses, doctors, and social workers so that we have personnel in our frontline institutions that can meet the service delivery needs of all of our citizens. Now, one of the things that we have tried to do over the last 5 years is to find ways in which we can use our own procurement spend to impact on the economic development of our province, and of course, most importantly, to create work. So, over the past 5 years, we have invested 53 billion in infrastructure. We've obviously built schools, hospitals, clinics, roads, a broadband network. But equally importantly, this investment has contributed 41 billion rand to Gauteng's economy, and it has created 265,000 jobs and promoted almost 500,000 expanded public works opportunities. Now that's a very important contribution in difficult economic circumstances, and it's one of the ways in which we have been able to put food on the table in poor households in our province. The other significant contribution of our procurement spend has been the 74 billion we have spent on procuring goods and services from 10,000 companies owned by historically disadvantaged individuals. And this includes companies owned by township entrepreneurs, women, and youth. In creating this market access, we have been able to open the doors for over 7,000 small and micro enterprises in our economy. And one of the things that we are proud of is that these are local jobs in communities where particularly young people are starting to have access to employment and income earning opportunities without having to spend vast amounts of money traveling to and fro from their workplaces each and every day. Now, when President Ramaphosa delivered the State of the Nation address, he spoke about the fact that only sustained growth is going to help us to confront our challenges of economic transformation and our challenges of job creation. As you've already heard, Gauteng province has a unique and special responsibility to play in growing our economy and in creating work. And to tell you more about that, and to tell you about some of the successes that we have achieved over the last 5 years, I want to invite to the podium Premier Makura. Could you please give him a warm welcome? Thank you. Thanks, Premier.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, let me acknowledge our host, Professor Nicola Klein, who assumed office just a year after we started with the fifth administration. So she became the dean of the school here a year after I became the premier of Gauteng. It's very good, Prof, that we have returned to GIPS, because the story of the past 5 years in terms of the work we have done in this province is also associated in a great deal in terms of the economy with our partnership with GIPS. I also want to acknowledge MEC Barbara Creasy, the DG of our province, and the head of Department of Treasury, and the business people here in our midst, as well as the panelists who are going to share some thoughts. The story of the past 5 years, because you can only understand the budget presented yesterday by MEC Creasy in its full context. We often say this must be read together with this. So the budget must be read together with the State of the Province address. And what is that story? So how have we spent the money we are entrusted with as an administration, the fifth administration in Gauteng? How have we spent that money, and what has been the impact of that on the lives of ordinary people in Houghton? So let's start with the economy, a bit of which MEC Creasy has shared with us. So we know that just over the past 25 years, the Houghton economy has grown 5 times, from a slightly under 300 billion rand GDP to 1.5 trillion rand GDP. We are the 7th largest economy in the continent. So we don't only talk about being the economic hub of our countries, but we are the industrial engine of sub-Saharan Africa. It is important to also understand, together with that, many other things have happened. The size of the number of people employed in our economy has doubled. And those figures, you would have them here, that we have grown employment just in 5 years alone, 469,000 jobs. But because we attract a lot of people into our economy, into our province, looking for work and looking for opportunities, to really have a big dent on unemployment, the number of jobs that this economy should be creating should be double in every sense of it. Double a day, double a month, double per annum, and in 5 years double that, to really have a big impact. Because you can see the population of our province is twice what it was just in 25 years ago.
So we are the engine, but we also have suffered the consequences of being this engine, because a lot more people come into our province, and it has a huge impact on infrastructure, on service delivery. But we have also been able to cope with this pressure very, very well. You would see that in terms of access to basic services, in a 25-year period, we have sustained improvement in service delivery in areas that matter: housing delivery, access to piped water, access to electricity, access to sanitation, refuse removal, and just basic services. Each of those areas we have sustained substantial growth. We couldn't do all those things without having to manage this province well. One of the things we are very proud of, if you think of education, so many things are said about the education system in our country, but what is often not said is what was the education system like in the townships 25 years ago. Many parents were taking their children out of township schools and sending them to suburban schools, to schools in the inner cities where the prospects of getting good education were very high. We, as I speak, we are reversing that trend. Many parents in the townships are bringing their children from the schools in the suburbs because township schools are working much, much better. The contribution of township schools to better educational outcomes, including to grade 12 results, is very high. We are the #1 province in grade 12 results, principally because township schools are doing much, much better today. And it's also a result of the huge investments we have made in education, better facilities, attracting teachers into those, stability in our education system in the townships. So we are very, very proud of the fact that parents don't have to have the kind of headache they would have had a decade ago. Lots of parents in the townships know that these township schools would produce bachelor passes, distinctions that are like any other schools we have. We have also invested hugely in the healthcare system. Education is often a key thing for the younger generation. The preoccupation of every family is that they want their children to have good access to quality education, so that it prepares them for a better future. But health, we know, health, the older you are, the greater the concerns you have around issues of health. So in this province, so it is largely older generations that we have invested a lot of health. The people who would be largely concerned with the functioning of the healthcare system would be older generations. And again, our healthcare services service not just the people of this province, the SADC region. So when we say we are the industrial hub of sub-Saharan Africa, there are other unintended consequences. The number of people in the SADC region who use our public health facilities, especially the tertiary services, it's huge, and that we are accounting for. And the good thing with our healthcare system is that the primary healthcare works much, much better. Our clinics are, with 75% of our clinics are the top in the country. In terms of providing what we call, they are the ideal clinics. They open on time. They have availability of medicines. They have better service delivery. The big problem with our healthcare system is with the hospitals. And that's where many citizens will tell stories that things are not working well. And that's the next big thing in our focus, is in ensuring that we turn around we reinforce the primary health facilities. We want the clinics to provide 24-hour service across the province, so that the hospitals, the larger number of citizens should be serviced by our clinics. People who go there should only be for referrals. Of course, we also have, and the greater part of the budget, MEC Chrissy, the greater part of the budget is consumed largely by what we call the central hospitals. The central hospitals are national facilities. But we spend a lot of the Houghton budget ourselves, subsidizing them. If you ask me as the Premier, in the next term, I want those central hospitals to go back to national government in the next term, so that we pay attention to the district and regional hospitals that are in our hands, that are aligned to our primary health care facilities to provide the best service. So the central hospitals are a big burden. They serve the nation and the region, SADC region, and they consume most of the budget. We need to spend more resources in the primary health care facility so that it is there. If you want a healthcare system that works well, the primary healthcare services must be top-class primary healthcare services. Houses, government subsidized houses. But because of the story that we have more people coming into our province, the backlog is static, 1 million backlog. The only way to shift and address the backlog, in our view, is to introduce a new approach to housing delivery. Everywhere I go, more people say they prefer that we allocate them serviced sites, including middle-class people, by the way. Because land in the urban areas is very expensive, including middle-class people who say, look, I don't qualify for an RDP house, but to buy land in Gauteng province is very expensive. So we are rolling out allocating serviced stands to those who want to build for themselves. It's amazing for me. Many people in the township say, if you allocate us land, we will build houses for ourselves. That's the new shift we are introducing to deal with the housing backlog. Gauteng province, in terms of attracting investment, has been the #1 province, 199 billion rands over 5 years. There's no doubt that the economy over the past 5 years has also gone through tremendous difficulties. I will say particularly from late 2015. All of us know the story of what happened in late 2015. That's Nenegate onwards. We lost lots of jobs in our economy. So to have achieved the sort of achievements we have had when the national economy and later also the global economy went through the difficulties it has had is a tremendous achievement for us. Of course, investment. There is no way you can grow an economy in an inclusive way if you can't attract investment. The Gauteng economy is also growing in a particular way now. It's insertion into the African continent. So we have lots of Gauteng-based businesses generating jobs in this economy through their economic activities in the African continent, especially in the SADC region. 42,000 jobs, to be precise, 45,000 jobs in our economy are maintained and sustained through the work that Gauteng-based businesses are doing in the continent. So it's very good for us that South African businesses, especially Gauteng businesses, are beginning to understand that their growth is linked with the African continent. And we must continue to do that. We must encourage these businesses to do that. Let me conclude by talking about something close to my heart. If you don't run the finances well, you would not be able to go as far as we have been able to do. So good governance and clean administration is our mantra. Over the past 5 years, we have done significant improvements. And I want to commend you, MEC Chrissy, and the head of Department of Treasury, because you are my crack team. You are my whippery, to whip every department in Gauteng to improve its management of public resources. This money is not our money. This is public money. We are entrusted with the responsibility to manage it well. How have we done that? We have improved in a very dramatic way. Just in 5 years, we have improved audit outcomes in Gauteng province. As you would know, 56% of departments in our province and entities in 2014 were having clean audits. Now 2/3 of our departments and entities have clean audits. Clean audits is the language of public administration. It means it's really that there is no question mark. But we even have 100%, we don't have an entity in Gauteng, 100% unqualified audits. There's no entity in Gauteng that has an adverse audit in this province. We don't have. In the past 2 years, it has been 100% unqualified audits. And this is very important for us. So we have a crack squad, a department or entity that doesn't take care of the finances well, we descend on them. I had to suspend the CEOs of entities and say to an MEC, we can't have the HOD running this department because they are mismanaging the affairs of government. So there are consequences in this regard. So I want to therefore conclude by saying that it is important to understand that our good improvements in education, the investments we have made in the township economy, the investments we have made in improving youth access of young people into the labor market, the investment we have made in terms of women and the girl child whose story, the numbers, you would see them here. All those investments can only bear fruits if we have strong leadership, we insist that corruption has no place under our administration. And one thing that has helped us very well is the introduction of the open tender system. There are business people who are here. You know, the open tender system has been an amazing innovation. So anyone can watch how a particular tender is allocated to a particular business. And there's no deals, there's no brown envelopes or somewhere else. There's no if you are paying a bribe, you are paying a bribe for something that will not give you the results. You might be paying a bribe even when you are actually going to still get the deal. So your bribe is being wasted on whichever official. Because the open tender system has helped us clean up those who want to get tenders through ways that we don't want in this province. So it has been a great pleasure and a great journey to work with business people. In this province, we have engaged with various sectors of industry, sector by sector, corridor by corridor. We know, sitting from here, I know as the premier, which are the main drivers, businesses that are driving growth in each sector, in each corridor. If it's in the north or in the east or in the central corridor or in the west or in the south of Houghton. I know the leaders of industry on a first name basis, major industries, major businesses that are driving the economy of Houghton. And we have been able to solve many problems together. Skills related issues, red tape, to cut red tape, infrastructure related issues. And we have worked with business leaders very, very well. So we're hoping that you will continue to support the growth of this economy. This is not just the economic hub of South Africa. Gauteng is the industrial engine of sub-Saharan Africa. We must drive the industrialization of our continent. But to do so, we need clean governance. We need to be uncompromising in fighting corruption. We need to insist on competence. And one thing I know with the Department of Treasury, we have had an amazing officials, an amazing head of department who has given very, very good leadership. You are a model department, actually, Treasury. This head of department has won many awards, including from me. Please stand up, HOD. And she's a woman. She's won many national awards, including awards from me. And Treasury in our province is the model department. Corruption doesn't happen there. And when there is something that has gone wrong, there's full accountability. Over the next 5 years, in my next term, I want every Gauteng department in my next term. I want every Houghton department to look like our treasury. Thank you very much.
Premier, thank you very much for that speech. At one point, I thought I was going to hear you saying that this is your farewell speech, but clearly isn't. Well, it did sound like a farewell speech at some point, and then you pulled the first one on us. All right, at this point, I'm going to ask members of my panel who are going to be interrogated or interrogating this particular budget of MEC Creasy to take their seats up here, and I'm going to ask someone to actually make sure that the seating arrangement is followed through. As you know, government and protocol, that's very important. In the meantime, while they take their seats, let me just give you a sense of who is in the room. So we have CEOs who are here, both from the private and public sector. We also have members from academia. There's Professor Nicola Klein sitting right in front of you. And of course, we have business people. So this is your moment to interrogate this budget and these achievements that the Premier has so eloquently claimed. I'm going to use those words carefully. You're claiming these achievements, Premier? Yes. The MEC has also spoken. You've heard from her. So at this stage, I am going to invite, before I open this session to the floor so that you throw your questions to the members of the panel, I'm going to ask that Nicola, no, that's Professor. I'm going to invite Tashmia Ismail Saville, and she is the CEO of the Youth Employment Service, just to give a sense of what her thoughts were around the MEC and in particular the Premier's speech. And once she's done, she'll be followed by Tabili Yoka, who is an economist. I'm sure you've seen her before, and she also will have her 5 minutes of her response to the Premier's speech. Tasmia, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you. This is on. So I'm a bit of a hybrid. I worked at Gibbs for a while before the Youth Employment Service. So I have the academia and the business side of things. So the Youth Employment Service is a collaboration between government, business and labor to address with singular focus nationally youth unemployment. We know the number today is 6.1 million of youth unemployed between the ages of 18 and 35. Through this work, we've worked very, very closely with the Premier's office. In fact, this was the first MOU YES ever signed, was with the Premier's office to help drive the TSEPO 1 million program. And an agreement, a completely egoless agreement, was reached very quickly that any placement would be considered a YES and TSEPO placement when we did those together. I've also had the good fortune to have worked with the Premier's office even before the Youth Employment Service officially started. And one of the things that came through that work was a desire by the Premier and his office to streamline the work of the various divisions. So we were looking at an SME program and an SME development program and township procurement. And very quickly it became apparent that there was replication of a large number of administrative structures to try to achieve the same outcomes. This was identified, it was diagnosed, and the idea was, how do we streamline, get them all on the same bus, have performance evaluation on how those budgets are spent in order to implement on that a lot better. So when we spoke recently on budgets, budgets very rarely rock your world. The allocations are generally the same. But what has the ability to really change things is the implementation of those budgets. And I wish we would have a budget implementation day rather than budget day to see how that money is being spent. So I think that this idea of not working in silos in provinces and integrating that, I hope that work really continues because it was a very positive step. The next thing to talk through is provincial integration. So we've, through GIBS and through the work in the Youth Employment Service, we spend a lot of time in townships. In fact, MEC Creasy, you'll remember we did a report on the township procurement project. So it's all very well to procure from townships, but are there significant numbers of businesses or enough businesses to meet the types of needs that the state has? And we found that that was deficient. So it's great to open this up, but we've got to at the same time work on making those businesses competitive enough to be able to supply not just the state, but to be able to compete outside of those state projects. And this is where the private sector can play a really beautiful role in helping to get those businesses up to the levels they need to be. So the transfer of skills, the transfer of technologies, but into townships. So why I'm focusing on this is because if we're talking about youth employment and we look at township spaces, unemployment numbers there are 6 out of 10 people. The role models, the exposure to careers, the great businesses need to start happening there in a significant fashion. All those small businesses will never be able to compete in the way we need them to drive employment where the unemployed are. So this idea of using the BE scorecard, as you know, the Youth Employment Service has an amendment to the scorecard which allows businesses that invest in youth employment to benefit with a level up or even 2 levels up on the scorecard. But the way we implement and use this can really be amplified if that integrated scorecard is aligned with the state. It has enterprise, it's got all the ingredients: enterprise development, skills development, and youth employment. So we're encouraging the private sector to come to the party by really thinking holistically about how they do BEE spend and aligning with that with the state, because the objectives are the same. And so you have our commitment that through businesses that are joining the Youth Employment Service, so we've got an average of about 650 jobs a week, work experiences a week, that YES is clocking up in the past 16 weeks since we officially started with registration. And when those companies come on board, a lot of what we're trying to do is say, please look at what we're doing with the state. So an example of this is our Tembisa Hub. The Tembisa Hub has got private sector funding, and you visited there recently, and you saw exactly how private sector funding is being integrated with state funding and state relationships to be able to build the infrastructure, the exposure, world-class technologies brought by the private sector into a township, and world-class skills so that people don't have to travel to get this. If we want to level the playing field, we've got to make these businesses more competitive, because small businesses are going to be our employment driver. And I think I'll stop there. I think those were my big things. It's about integration of scorecard, private sector coming to the party and finding the aligned objectives and co-investing with you.
Thank you very much, Tasmia. And indeed, those inputs, I'm sure you will have an opportunity to also give a sense of what Tasmia has had to say here. Let me give now the opportunity to Tabi Leoka. Tabi, give us your sense of all these commitments that have been made here, and of course, the inputs from the Premier.
Thank you. So I'd like to begin by congratulating both the Premier and the MEC for a good budget, very, very impressive budget. And I don't say this easily as an economist. We usually tear things apart and numbers apart. But let me just give you a few numbers, throw a few numbers in terms of the state of the economy. So we all know that Eskom has about 450 billion rand debt. South Africa, before the financial crisis, the debt, the country's debt, the sovereign debt, was around 500 billion. So almost the size of Eskom's current debt. Eskom's debt is bigger than the budget for health, bigger than the budget for education. So to have a province, which is basically the heart of the economy, raise the ability to raise 7 billion is quite impressive, given that it's so difficult to raise money currently in South Africa. And if you speak about the state-owned entities' abilities to raise money, it's very, very difficult, especially given our sovereign rating as a country. We also, debt servicing costs are increasing. making it very costly for the economy to actually service some of the debt. I think debt servicing cost is about 10% or over 10% of our budget. So it's quite a significant amount of a number. I know the Premier talked about education, and I know that, you know, speaking at GIBS, we should value education. But I have another thing about education in South Africa. So about 14 million South Africans are part of the NEETs, not in education, employment, and training. And I think that there is a bit of an overemphasis on getting the degree. And I talk about someone who has multiple degrees, but I think that given our history, and given that we have this big population between ages of 15 and 60 that are not in education, employment, and training, I think we need to rethink how we are going to absorb these people into the workplace. We're not promoting entrepreneurship enough. Actually, sometimes we look down upon it. We look down upon, you know, plumbers and people who can actually provide for themselves and employ other people, painters, etc. A country like Switzerland is one of the most advanced countries in the world, only has 30% of its population have degrees. The rest, 70%, have apprenticeships. So I think we need to also, given the country that we are, we need to promote this apprenticeship and entrepreneurship. You know, becoming an accountant, yes, you can work for an accounting firm, but what about small businesses that should be the heart of economic growth? I don't think we're promoting that strongly enough. So not everyone can go to university, and it should be okay. And this is where then the education comes in. Early childhood development and also basic education need to be of top quality. Actually, there should be a point in South Africa where most of us prefer to go to school in public schools rather than private schools, because public schools are offering us better education. This we see in a lot of Latin American countries where the competition to go to public schools much higher than private schools. So again, I think that we need to get the education right to enable people to start their own businesses, hire South Africans, instead of this push to go to university, where if you see the number of people, first years, students at first year, and you see actually those who finish with a degree, it's a no-brainer. Obviously, not everyone can go to a university, but also the return on investment from the state side, from parents, is not. We're not getting the return on investment that we should get. Lastly, you know, investment is a very important one, and investment is links to, I guess, health and security, safety, policing. So we had our GDP numbers yesterday, and they indicated that for 4 consecutive quarters, investment declined. And so this is something that, and this, investment is something that the president has been pushing. So why is it declining? Why are we not attracting the investment? Are we speaking to the right people? Have we identified where investment needs to go? And I think that's and I asked even, the president's economic advisor, Trudy, about this, that we need to also, when we look for investment, we need to be very targeted to say, are we looking for investment that is growth generating and that has a multiplier effect, so it will employ a lot more people because of this investment? Or are we just attracting a mining company that may not necessarily employ as many people as we want, and also will not train people to be independent entrepreneurs on their own? Lastly, Premier, if you need help with housing, please give me Alex. I want to be a part of the Alex building it. Honestly, I live just across from Alex, so Alex is my neighbor. I want to be able to run over the pedestrian bridge at night after work. And we have the stunning bridge that is empty after 5 or 6. I think it's a beautiful infrastructure that I think should be utilized. So again, that talks to safety. But the other thing with space, you talk about space in urban areas. If you go anywhere in the world, there are high rises in urban areas, especially where government housing is involved. We don't need the land in urban areas, especially for government housing. So I would honestly bulldoze the entire Alex, build high rises, 15 to 20 high rises with balconies, 3 to 4 bedrooms, and then the whole area make it very socially active. So have parks and have good schools, and I've seen the schools that have been produced by the MEC of Education, beautiful schools, but have this lifestyle where people live, but also there is, you can have soccer fields there and a big park there, but you don't need the massive land to accommodate all those people. You just need high rises, just like you see in Turkey and in Asia and some of our major market competitors. So I think we should start looking at creative ways of housing South Africans, especially those who come to Gauteng, because many of them actually spend their weekends outside of Gauteng. So I think that we can be a lot more creative in our urban development, and just I would love to be part of Alex development.
Tabile Yoga. Well, there's her input. Premier, I'm not sure whether you're going to bite on bulldozing Alexandra. I think the people of Alex would actually be very happy to hear that, as long as you can accommodate them somewhere else while you rebuild their houses.
I don't know.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is your moment then, where you get to pose your questions to my panelists here. And I see that as a person who keeps time, we are running a bit over, but nonetheless, I think my colleagues at ENCA will be a bit lenient. Will probably give us another 10 minutes or so. So this is your moment where you get to pose the questions. You've heard the target areas, I think issues around jobs and kickstarting this economy. That's very important. MEC, I think you've allocated about 1.6 billion towards jobs and economic development. Indeed. So there's also the issue of education. Tabile Yoga, very, very clear around those. There's the issue of the health sector in Gauteng. I don't need to tell you about what has happened there. You know the story. So this is your moment. Please, can I just have a hand, and you introduce yourself and pose your question, please. And I do see one there. Is there a microphone going around? I have one right here. Can I distribute quickly? Yes.
like skills development and youth employment, to make sure that when incumbents come in, they're not just seen through the year and corporates are getting the stamp, and then after that year, they then go back and they start to contribute towards unemployment. So what are those incentives that corporates can start to look out for, and what are those policy changes that could be critical in ensuring that those incumbents that go in through skills development remain in those organizations?
So, you know, with the employment opportunities that are coming through the Youth Employment Service, what's wonderful is that many companies are opting to do their youth jobs in community, in many cases in social jobs, or as agents on the ground. Now, those are the best types of jobs because after the year-long work experience, people can transition into jobs where they're able to start their own businesses in a community. So there's an entrepreneurial channel or a small business channel. The difficulty with young entrepreneurs is they've never worked. And so part of what this work experience can do is give a young person the experience of being in a business, what it's like, because how do you run a business when you've never been in one? So not only does this give you a CV and reference letter that de-risks you, but it also makes you aware of business rules and operations. So that's one of the ways in which we're doing it. We have a host of implementation partners across the country, And those youth jobs are not all sitting in corporates. You know, people flood this province looking for jobs, but the jobs that are available are for highly skilled people. In fact, most of the service economy is disintermediating many, many classes of jobs. And so Tabi's point around streams for artisanal and vocational training at community level will offer huge opportunity for these youth to actually be absorbed after the year. But you've targeted something very important, and we are spending a lot of time trying to communicate to companies that that year-long work experience needs to lead into something more sustainable. And we've got to integrate with the other provinces. It's not actually healthy that Gauteng dominates the landscape in the way that it does, because people come here seeing Igoli and thinking it's their life.
It puts more pressure on us.
It puts pressure here. So you actually come to Gauteng, you're in an informal settlement, and you're living a much poorer quality of life, and you've left your kids behind. So, you know, integration with the other provinces, that some of this migration comes or slows down, and that means creating opportunities in other provinces so that people can have a better quality of life there.
Thank you very much, Tasmia. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that one of my panelists has to go at 9. Do you have a specific question targeted at Tabili Yoga? That's not to say that the Premier and the MEC aren't your targets. I think those are your primary targets, aren't they? So is there anyone who has a specific question targeted at Tabili Yoga? All right, in the absence of that, please, can I have more hands that are going to ask the Premier about the cost of living in his province? Premier, what's happening with the e-tolls? I haven't heard anything about it. The MEC has been completely silent on the issue of e-tolls. The cost of living in Gauteng is just becoming so expensive. Sir, you have the floor.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ali Eskusana. I am from Oricon, an engineering and infrastructure advisory firm. I'm quite honored to be here today and very excited by both Tasmia and hearing the MEC speak. What I'd like to ask directly in the question at both the Premier and the MEC, how does business, especially a big business which is multinational, begin to support and change the competition landscape in Gauteng, where we are aligned to growing black businesses, smaller businesses, and we don't dominate. We are in a position where we are a larger firm, we are generally less transformed, we are level 1 BE, we play by the rules, we are supporting from that side. But how do I grow my revenue and help the country's objectives as well?
Premier, MEC?
Well, may I just leave the more difficult questions to the MEC? Tabi, I think Tabi's vision of how to integrate Sandton and Alexandra in every sense of it is a vision I share deeply. I've got family in Alexandra. I spent a decade there. So Alexandra is it's a mark of how far we have not gone as a country. And we're spending a lot of time as government thinking about how to develop, change that place. I've said a few times, the only way to change Alexandra is to take everybody out, your idea, to take everybody out and then redo the place and bring them back. But it is a very difficult. I have family there. The people, if you're talking about moving people out of Alexandra, you know, land is the sentiment as well. There's a lot, people are very sentimental about Alexandra. And of those who own land there, what the property owners who have owned land there for a long time, and those who live in there who have moved in there. So it is an important mark of how far our country would have developed to get Alexandra to be remade, completely remade. But it is a very complex social project. We have done the decongestion of Alexandra before, in a decade ago, moving people to the different parts, the eastern part of Alexandra. It is not easy, I can tell you. And it's a function, it's a vision that we must pursue. But you can only do that by working with people there who are very passionate about me moving out of my, I've lived here, I've got my entire family here. If you are asking me to move and you are going to do something else, especially to develop social housing, what building up will be very difficult with some of the landowners in Alexandra, because all they tell you, this is our land. So if government wants to come and build up everywhere, we will not, you've got to compensate us for that. So it's an important project. I've had 3 weeks ago, I was in Alexandra in a public meeting there. I have a team from my office that's engaging with the community there, but the most difficult issue is the land owners in Alexandra, people who have owned land there since for over a century. So I think that story of Alexandra is something that Tabi, we should work with you on. The cost of living in Gauteng is a real issue, and you would hear us talk about it all the time. There are those areas of cost that we can control, administered prices, the additional cost for doing business. The e-tolls is an example. The e-tolls are a cost. They impact on households, but they also impact on businesses. I often give an example. Someone who is running a business, who lives in Soweto, who has to travel throughout the different parts of a province, a small business, has to go through many of those tolls many times a day. And it has a direct impact on what in the end it means for them. So that it's for that reason that we take the view that we take, that the e-tolls have no future.
Do your counterparts at National agree with you?
There's a very important, we have reached a very important milestone. And that important milestone is that tolling, urban tolling is not sustainable. Because we're not concerned with big business. Big business guys like Oregon, you can afford to pay for yourself. We are concerned with households, including middle-class people who have to travel, people who work in Tshwane, who live in Johannesburg, people who live in the townships, who work in the inner city, who have to travel many times. We are concerned about that. We are concerned about small businesses. And so if you were to say to me, yes, big business, I'll never worry about big business. You make your money. You can pay. You are the big guns. You can take care of yourselves. But the e-tolls are a big story for households and small businesses. And we are doing everything, in my view, we are doing everything to get to finality on the matter. I have already said a lot about it. The last thing I want to say is that we have enjoyed a very good partnership. There is no way we can solve our economy's problems without a partnership. We have entered a new period in South Africa. With President Ramaphosa there, we have entered a new period. He's been a union leader. He's been in business. He is in government. We think that he is one leader our country has now who will be able to help us pull the various strands in our society. You know, the unions can be very difficult. If they don't see issues the same way, you may have major difficulties. Business. If business decides that this government we are not going to work with, they can come to meetings, but they've made up their minds. We're hoping that we are in an era with his leadership where all the key sectors of our society can work together. South Africa's, the next big thing in our country is that we have to work together. The partnerships, youth unemployment, we have already done a great thing around the opportunities. We have shown that if we will focus on the right issues, and the key thing with youth unemployment is not taking students, young people to university. With the example of what we are doing with Harambee, is that even those who may have not completed grade 12 have a place in our economy. Harambee, our partnership with Harambee is able to equip young people with the skills that somebody who's running a business is looking for someone with this type of skills. It takes sometimes 8 months. So we have programs that we are running with Harambee to train young people who who have not, some of them have completed grade 12, but others grade 11, but they are too old now. And it is giving them hope. So it is true that if we focus a lot more on what type of skills and where are the jobs coming, which sectors will provide those type of jobs. Yes, in the long term, yes, we need a better educated nation. Yes, in the long term, we need TVET colleges and higher education universities in the long term. But in the immediate term, the large number of people who are unemployed are the kind of people who don't need a degree to access a job. And we are dealing with that through TEPO 1 million.
Premier, let me interrupt you there, and I want to bring in the MEC on the issue of infrastructure spend, MEC. Your department says that for the 4 years running, you are the only province that has spent 97% of that budget. But before we give you that opportunity, let me release you, Tabilioka.
Thank
because
you.
I think I know.
Apologies, I'm also part of the PIC Commission of Inquiry.
Indeed. So you see, she has to go to one of those important commissions of inquiry that are going on in the country. Yes. So we understand.
To clean up the country.
Indeed, she has a national duty to go to. So thanks, Tabi, for having participated here. All right, MEC, whilst you do that, let me also just indicate that perhaps after the MEC's response on infrastructure, we will break away from the live feed on ENCA, and indeed this, of course, has been done in partnership with ENCA, so we really do appreciate that. In the meantime, let's get the MEC to respond on that element. And what are your thoughts on infrastructure spend in the province? We have buildings that are falling apart. The story of, what was that building next to the ANC headquarters?
Bank of Lisbon.
You have the school that recently fell, MEC, the walkway, terrible tragedy. You have people frustrated today. The M2 is completely shut because of the road needing to be resurfaced. But who's benefiting as well? Are you benefiting from all these infrastructure build programs that government is driving? MEC, talk to us.
Well, part of the way I'd like to respond is by responding to Mr. Skosana's question, because I think the real issue is how do we spend our money in a way that helps new entrants into our economy. So the plea that I would make to the private sector is, if you are doing business with provincial government, how are you opening up your own supply chains to those emerging enterprises that are located in the township? We now have a database of 32,000 township enterprises, and we can categorize that database according to commodity, according to geographic area. And I think the plea that we're making to corporates, if you're doing an infrastructure in Tembisa, we can help you fulfill your regulatory requirements of 30% subcontracting with bona fide de-risked Tembisa subcontractors. And the same would go for any other area in the province. So that is our great plea to you. It is not possible, however much goodwill we have as provincial government, to create market access for everybody who wants to do business with us. And what we are asking you is, can you also give these companies an opportunity so that they can be sustainable long after provincial government has stopped working with them? And that obviously means you may have to do some hand-holding when it comes to producing at price on time. But I think that that hand-holding is worth its weight in gold, because in future you will have a loyal partner that you will be able to work with, and you will be doing your duty for your country. So I think Tashmira made the point when she gave her input that when money is short, you have to be creative and you have to create linkages. So how you spend your infrastructure money can benefit a few corporates, or it can benefit everybody in the province. How you spend your pharmaceutical money can benefit a few, or it can benefit widely. And the plea that I think we are making to business in general is partner with us, we have innovative solutions that will help de-risk pulling small suppliers into your supply chain. And in the process, you'll be creating work for young people, and you'll be creating a more stable political environment in which you can do business.
Ladies and gentlemen, any question towards the MEC on the issue of infrastructure? All right, let me give an opportunity to a new hand. We'll take you, ma'am, and then we'll come back to you. The microphone is coming.
Best incubator for small businesses in a company's supply chain. There's so much that big businesses can do.
Thank you very much. My question is more about a lot of activities that are happening in Gauteng, which affects the safety of the country at large, the safety of SADC and countries like Lesotho, Mozambique, etc. I'm talking about the issue of zamazamas, which also affect or may affect other infrastructures. What is the province doing, together with national, of course, I know the Premier might say that's a national competence. What is the province doing in order to ensure that we get South Africa to be safe again from the gangsterism that happens in the different townships, etc., due to that? And the other thing is, what are we doing in order to rehabilitate the dams that are out there, where the townships are getting closer to them? And it's not only about dams. Dams will affect the airborne diseases. And then the other thing is the rivers are contaminated due to acid mine drainage. And we are building in those areas. We are building in that land. We're talking about land now. And a lot of people are seeing vacant land, and they want to go and build in those vacant. What is the province doing to ensure that safety in terms of health, in terms of what I've already mentioned? And then number two, I wanted to comment to the lady that has just left. Maybe she should also bring me in when she does the Alex thing. That we also need to look at the traditional and cultural well-being of the people. The high-rise buildings might not work for me, who wants to park every time on the corner of my house. But anyway, Premier, when are you going to remove the gantries?
You see, I told you, the issue of vetols is not going away. But I think also the issue of Alex, it's almost a deja vu moment for you. Just yesterday, we're dealing with the aftermath of, a few dwellings there were burnt down. It really is a sad story.
Yes.
But
well,
it's your privilege to respond.
I think perhaps the cultural issues that she's raising is like the subliminal. We've got many areas where people tell us, this is an urban province. They tell us you have built what's called walk-ups. Basically, that's high density structures. People really resist. Yes, people who don't have houses resist moving in those. And they talk about culture, and this is what they need to do. This is what they need to do. So development is a complex process. You can't impose a particular model of development on people, because development must be about their well-being in every spiritual, cultural, economic, social well-being. But if they say to you, this type of development you say is development, it's not development for us, can be very difficult. I think that's the story of thinking that you can move the people of Alexander and build walk-ups there, everywhere. Some of those dimensions will arise. And yet we have to make a choice. This is a province that has limited land. We've got to develop, we've got to build in a particular way. So I would like to, the big challenge about illegal mining activity, because that's what it really is. The illegal mining poses a big threat from the far east of our province to the far north, to the far west. From Springs to Carltonville, passing through, so it's Ekurhuleni, passes through Ekurhuleni, Johannesburg, and the West Rand communities. So it poses a big challenge. The kind of crimes that take place related to illegal mining are a lot. People get killed there, and the lady was just giving examples. But you also have informal settlements that are built around certain exit and entry points into those illegal mines. So it's a huge issue. It requires a comprehensive approach. There's no city alone that can deal with that issue. No province alone. It's one of those things that requires a national, provincial, and local government to deal with. The police have spent a lot of time. Unfortunately, if you deal with illegal mining just as a policing issue, I can tell you it is not going to be sustainable. There are also issues we must look at, whether the artisanal miners in South Africa need a dispensation. So you decriminalize certain parts of that and bring people to surface, and you have to do that taking into account the impact on the mining industry. Because there's also a lot of activity. You have big players in this illegal mining who are big corporate criminals, I would like to call them, corporate criminals, who buy from those small guys who are spending sleepless nights under there. So, but I will say that our country needs a fresh look on how to deal with that. Yes, you can worry about the infrastructure, the threats it poses to all that, but artisanal miners in our country need a particular dispensation. I know countries where they have decriminalized and brought these guys up, and then you license them, those who want to do that, and then you structure relationships with the big corporates. So yeah, it's one of those areas I would say we need that approach. Policing alone, you are not going to get very, very far with that issue. When are the countries going to be put off? I think I can say that the last report I gave, that the president is looking at the matter, because truly speaking, you shouldn't listen to anyone who is a mayor or a premier who says they will resolve the e-toll matter. They are not telling the truth. I've said that in public, because these roads are in the hands of SANRAL, which is a national entity. So you can have a mayor who says, I'll do something, I'll resolve the matter. They can't. And that's why I have decided the best way to deal with the e-tolls is to say to the president, the people of this province don't want the e-tolls. This matter must be resolved. It's in your hands. The president has said to me, I'm dealing with ESCOM now, I'm having e-tolls. And then there are many other things he has. But what I'm happy with is that e-tolls is now it's on his national agenda. Let's pray for this president. He's got many issues on his table. Let's pray for this president.
So while we seek divine intervention, I see the Prof wants to say something. While we seek divine intervention, I know that you said we have a president who understands the two worlds, both as a worker and as a businessman. So hopefully he will listen, and will listen with a sympathetic ear. MEC, the issue of the open tender system, basically fighting corruption. 570 companies have been awarded tenders through this open tender system. How has that worked? And is there anyone in the audience who's actually been working with the province, particularly with the introduction of the open tender system? Tell me, how is it working? And by the way, are you still being paid within 30 days?
You know, we ran a big campaign, hashtag GP Budget 2019. Some of you might have sent us advice. One of the things that we received was a whole lot of comments on the open tender system, which we didn't solicit. And to me, it was very interesting that a number of people indicated that they had gone to those sessions and that one person was saying she went for 2 months to those sessions, and that she learned an enormous amount about how to tender for government work, and that she now, in fact, herself is a recipient of a government tender. So I think that not only have we awarded 80 tenders to the value of 18 billion rand through the system.
Sorry, MEC, you said 18 billion.
Yes. 80 tenders valued at 18 billion rand through the open tender system. I think the spin-offs have been, first of all, very minimal legal contestation of tender awarding in this term. In the previous term, provincial government was actually gridlocked with contest over awarding of tenders. So the fact that everybody's there, everybody knows how much, who, what, when, how, it's all online, I think that it really has deterred competing bidders from suing each other when one or other receives a tender. It's had this unintended consequence of free public education, which was not our plan when we started doing it. But I think that it's also brought about greater accountability and probity in the issuing of tenders. And it is our intention this year to enshrine this in law so that going forward, all provincial departments and entities will have to allocate tenders in that way. One of the questions that came up early on was, is the open tender system at odds with our empowerment objectives? And I think that of that, you cite 500 companies. I think that 480 of those companies are owned by historically disadvantaged individuals. So what we have found is that there is absolutely no conflict of interest between clean, accountable government and empowerment. Of course, what is at conflict is somebody who knows me getting something through the back door because of who they know. That's in conflict. But I think that is exactly what we want to root out of our tender system. We want black-owned companies to receive tenders through the front door because they deserve them. And I think that this system really is facilitating that actually happens. Payment of suppliers, the majority of our departments paying 92% of their invoices within 15 days.
You guys get that? 15 days.
15 days, not 13 days.
Yes,
not 30
that's
days.
our own standard. It's not a national standard. It's our
you guys will then be the ones to tell us indeed if this is happening. The MEC is saying
education is paying 85% within 30 days, which is amazing. I mean, we're talking a budget of 49 billion here. It's not petty cash. Health, 68% of their invoices within 30 days. A year ago, it was 30%. Not where we want them to be, but let's give credit where credit is due.
Wow. Prof, you wanted to say something.
Thank you so much. So I just wanted to congratulate the MEC on the budget. And also on it's very rare, I think, at the moment that both in the private sector and in government, that people can stand up and bravely talk about you will not find corruption here. So I would like to do a shout out. As a citizen, however, of Gauteng, I think for many of us, the lines between what is national government, what is provincial government, what is municipal government, it doesn't matter. It's our lives. And so my question is to you both, actually, as citizens of this province, on areas that perhaps may not be in your direct control, but that you look at as a citizen and go, we need to collectively be lobbying for changes here and here. MEC, we were talking this morning about the closure of the M1 and about the fact that that actually falls within the city's ambit. So I'd love comments from both of you around that, putting on your citizen hats.
It's very frustrating, I must tell you, Prof. It's very frustrating as a citizen to be told it is not we are not responsible, to go to a government office and be told, no, we are not responsible for this. Go to another office, or it's not the sphere, it's that sphere. It's very frustrating also for me on the other side, as a premier, to say, I can't do something about this because it is another sphere that is responsible when it happens in Gauteng. It is frustrating also for those of us who are in government. And unfortunately, government, even with a blue light, to get out of the CBD of Johannesburg, and what is the impact of the bridge, that bridge closure? It was impossible. I tried this corner, I was just thinking, what about citizens? And in a sense, things like those require collective decision making. The impact, so sometimes when decisions are made, we only think of the here and now. Now I can't complain to you, I'm the premier. So one of the things I'm really going to do is to sit down with Mayor Mashaba. So as we fix that bridge, how do we make sure that there's no, the Houghton, because if Johannesburg comes to a standstill, the whole economy, few months later, we will feel the impact. It's almost like ESCOM, allowing ESCOM to function. That road is a mini ESCOM. It has an impact on our economy that's like a mini ESCOM. So all I want to say is that I think we just need to work together and get things to work for our citizens much more.
Boost to national government, which will make things so much easier.
I didn't hear that one.
Imagine, so, you know, Premier, there's one thing you don't realize, and that is that we work in the media with, or we listen with a soundbite ear. The M2 is a mini ESCOM. Yes. That's a soundbite. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the conclusion of this. We've come to the conclusion, but I see a hand right at the back and at the front here. And this is actually what happens when we are now closing. People suddenly want to ask questions. All right, so I will allow this opportunity.
Yes.
And just for these last few hands, but also importantly, once you've taken these hands, Premier and MEC, we can't not talk about life as a Dimeni.
Yeah.
Can you assure us that that will never happen again?
Yes.
But also, importantly, crime. The CBD, I'm told, it's not, you can't even walk there without being accosted. And
yes, those two issues.
Indeed. So, but you have the floor, sir and ma'am. Let's give the lady a chance, perhaps. Oh, you have the microphone. Okay. All right.
Thank you, sir. This mic is from the Damage Data Group. I have a question for both the MEC and the Premier. Obviously, I'm a technology guy. I'd be very interested to understand what the province is doing to encourage investment in the new technologies, IoT, the cloud.
Perhaps let's take the last question as well, so that we just group them.
People building their own houses is a really nice
idea. Good morning. Premier and possibly the MEC, even if you don't have an answer for this one specifically, I would want to talk about the next elephant in the room, and that is the service delivery. So as investment is being an issue or sort of an impediment at the moment, one of the issues or the impact or the cause is the service delivery, right? We know that at the critical point of the day, either in the morning, there is fires being started for real reasons. So my question is, how does the province begin to strategically position itself so that there is enough intelligence on the ground to understand when the service delivery are being started, or when will they be, you know, in the key gate areas, so that there's a penetration or infiltration, and that there's there's a smooth transition and communication area before it becomes a challenge. So I understand that there might be an answer now, but then I believe that part of the things that will help us with the communication into the community and improving the investment is that, tackling it earlier.
Thank you. MEC, Premier.
So, Nadise, thank you for that question. In yesterday's budget, you would have seen we allocated 1.4 billion rand to the Department of E-Government, and that is our flagship department in terms of the modernization of the province. The fiscal condition has affected that department, and I'm happy to say that we are now in discussion with CETA, Centec and Broadband Infraco to look at how we can continue the implementation of the broadband network through a joint ownership and revenue sharing model, because we believe that we've got an asset that we should be able to sweat. Obviously, connectivity is the foundation to the issue of cloud and Internet of Things and so on. So we want to be able to complete that project, but in the meantime, we're not stopping. We do already have a provincial cloud. We are in discussion about how we make some of that cloud publicly available, because what we've come to realize is we can't just have a private cloud, there has to be a public cloud. We are in the process, in fact we have already taken to the Executive Council a policy on big data, so that we can begin to work out what we must collect, how we must process it, and what we must share. And then of course there is our common platform, where we are starting to load all of the provincial e-services, so that our citizens don't have to do the walking. They can access through the fingers. Of course, we are dependent on large corporates such as yourselves to work with us in our Innovation and Technology Forum, so that together we work out solutions for a smart province. And I know that you do participate there, and that relationship and partnership is very important and meaningful to us. Maybe one would just want to say on the Life Esedimeni that we have in this particular budget allocated 300 million through the Department of the Premier, and that is to compensate families who have applied subsequent to the initial compensation and have been approved by the Master of the High Court. And I think Premier will in his concluding remarks say a little bit more about how we want to make sure that such an incident never happens again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, MEC. Premier.
Thank you very much, Oli. Let me say that so we are clear that there are certain areas of our work where we have made tremendous impact, which we want to upscale in the next term, and that's if citizens think we must continue. I want to qualify that, because it's citizens who decide. It's not parties who decide who governs. What are those areas? It's education. So the areas, education, we believe that we have done a great job. In the next 5 years, we want to, through what's called schools of specialization, we want to bring more the different type, a skills focus, even at school level. The township economy, we think the initiatives we have started, the rest of the country is following us. We are the leader in this area. These township businesses need to be linked with corporates. For sustainability, they need to be linked with corporates in their value chains. The youth, the initiative around bringing young people, giving them the skills not as someone thinks, but as the economy requires. This initiative, including working with the YES, we want to upscale. 500,000 young people are not enough. We have in this province 1.8 million out of youth, out of school and out of work. If we want to upscale, the next 5 years we must target to reach another million. Women, in particular, the key thing with women, the empowerment program, women are locked out of certain sectors of the economy. We want to make sure that there are major companies that are women-owned that are players in certain key sectors of the economy. The major economy, We have started an initiative that focuses sector by sector growth, targeting Tshwane, Johannesburg, West Rand, Sidibeng. In the next, working with the mayors, it doesn't matter from which party you come from. We must have one vision for Gauteng. So the vision for Gauteng is we are a city region. We want to become a mega special economic zone. What you do in Johannesburg matters for the whole economy. What you do in Tshwane matters for the whole economy. That vision is something that is deeply shared. So let's come back to, so these are the areas where we think we have done very infrastructure investment. And Polly, just to deal with the infrastructure investment, we think we have invested more in new infrastructure and maintenance of old infrastructure. Both municipalities and provincial and national departments are not doing enough. They are not putting enough money into maintenance of existing infrastructure. That's what whether from water, sanitation problems, the story is that government is focusing more on the new. And it's because we are dealing with the pressure in Gauteng province, the pressure of the arrivals, the new arrivals. But we think this is something we have discussed in the province, that our Department of Infrastructure needs to spend more money on maintenance. It doesn't help to build new infrastructure, but you are not maintaining. So that's the point you were asking about, the bridge, the buildings, and you can even say about sanitation infrastructure. But there's two areas where I think we have, for going forward, we need a fundamental shift. One of them is healthcare. Life Esidimeni tells just one part of the story. It's mental. It was about neglect, the neglect of mental health, because it's the stigma with mental health is not just it's in communities, in families, even the health workers who work in that space, and the decision makers have a stigma. I actually think the mental health patients were just treated as mental health patients. Life Esidimeni happened, that's why I said heartlessness and big-headedness, refusal to listen and refusal to feel that these are people as well. So we are working with the whole of government, not just health workers, that government officials must be driven by one thing. They must feel. The people who are receiving the services from government must be the measure about whether we are doing a good work or not. So we have done a lot of work. We have gone back to departments in the province. We're getting officials to sign pledges, but it's not only about pledges, good management practices, holding people accountable. And I've been saying, anyone who works in government who has decision-making authority must never say, they told me to do this. And if you are told to do a wrong thing, you must know, you must live with the consequences. Because you can refuse to do a wrong thing. If you are instructed to remove patients from a functional facility to facilities that are not able to do any work, you can't come later and say, I was afraid. Otherwise, you should be able to have recourse to say, I refused to do this. So it's not only in mental health, it's in many areas of decision making, where half the time people who have the authority to make decisions are either heartless or big-headed, but also those who implement want to have an explanation why they did it. Something that is wrong is wrong. So how do we make sure it never happens? The work we are doing to overhaul and hold accountable every single public servant, because people get paid, they get paid a lot of money by citizens, and that includes us at the political level, holding people accountable. I would say that the health story, the Life Esidimeni story, that must not be in vain. And we want to carry that message to every part of changing the way government works. But I also think the point I was making is that the healthcare system has to function closest to where communities are. we have to turn around. We have to make sure that our primary health care facilities are the most equipped. The best doctors are there. The best doctors can be put in the hospitals. They have to be put in there, and those institutions must function well. So health, yes, we need a big turnaround of health for going forward in Gauteng. But I must also say, Xoli, that I think there is a degree to which we need to have a conversation with our the SADC counterparts. There are countries that must pay. I'm not saying, yeah, there are countries that must pay for their citizens who use our health services. Those countries must pay. Some of these countries are just running as if they are not governments, because everything's, you know, think of Lesotho, think of Swaziland, think of Zimbabwe, think of Mozambique. You have governments there, but their citizens almost get everything in South Africa. We are not going back to the countries. I'm saying, yes, the citizens, if someone is ill, arrives at a hospital. Hospitals are about saving life. Health is about saving. You can't turn them back and say because they are Zimbabwean. The nature of health institutions and the service is to save life. But we must go back to the government of Zimbabwe and say, we have treated so many citizens from your country in our facilities because you are not providing health care. You owe us this amount of money. That's something I really am determined we must do. We must collect this money from these governments. The last area is crime. There is no doubt that crime is ravaging our communities. There is no part of the province where people are safer. And I can tell you where I live. I tell this story to my colleagues all the time. I say it in the legislature. Even where I live, there's a break-in. They drive through the wall, they break the wall. Even where I live, I have family that my son sometimes thinks he is a police. So safety issues are not the sense that the criminals are conducting a reign of terror. It is something that every citizen feels in our province. In the last few, so what are we doing about it? I am convinced that the current reorganization and the operations that the police are conducting, our province will be it will increasingly become safer. Because often, what is the crime problem is a function of whether the police services integration. Think about it. Metro police. We have lots of metro police. What are they focusing on? What is your experience? What is your experience?
Nothing.
What are they focusing on?
Nothing. Nothing.
Fines.
Traffic fines. That's what you say. It's not me. We have lots of the important thing is we have enough fighting forces to deal with crime in our province. We are better than many parts of the country. We have 3 metro police departments. If you bring them together with the South African Police Service, they can do a much better job. So this is what we are doing with them. You see me every Thursday, I'm out. Join me only tomorrow. I don't want to disclose where, because the criminals will know. And every Thursday from the police start at 2 a.m. and then I join them at 5 or 6 o'clock. We conduct operations, large-scale operations. We just shut down an area, and then we arrest. We have on average arresting 25 wanted criminals, most wanted criminals in an area. But Thursdays are only for me. We're saying to the police, conduct these operations every day. Drugs are a big problem. There's no community in Gauteng, even the suburbs. Go to our schools. The schools where our children go, there's drugs around those areas. The people who distribute drugs are buying houses next to our schools to target our children. It's drugs, it's robbery, it's gender-based violence. So Xoli, I can't complain as the Premier. I can't complain about lack of integration. We are sorting it. bit by bit. So every Thursday I will be out. I asked anyone who met her to join us. We shut down an area. We get these most wanted criminals. They are put behind bars. We go to the next area. We go to the next area. But I say to the police, you must do this every day. Your job is a daily job. Conduct these operations. Go to an area where you are told that where families, whether it's on the farming areas, the plots where it's about farm murders or femicide or murder and robbery or business robbery. This is something, so when you have crime rate that we have now, you can't solve it. Yes, we must pray, but you can't solve it through prayer. I think police visibility, and police have to be tough. They really, really have to be tough. And I want to say to you that I think this attitude to crime that we must go, last week we cracked down. They even have police vehicles. We cracked down on a syndicate in Leondale, in a house where in this house there was a police that had the blue lights, a car that had blue lights. These guys have been conducting roadblocks on the ways, robbing people. They have police uniforms. We found them in their house. They had dockets in their house. And we said to the leadership of the police in the province, this is what it means. Let's crack down. Let's get these guys behind bars. I am confident now. The NPA is sorted. You know, one of the big problems we had as a country is that the prosecution authorities was captured. So almost every other institution, crime intelligence was captured. I think President Ramaphosa has sorted out one institution, the NPA. We think if they are arrested, so we sort out the police. The police in this province, we have a police commissioner who is really determined, a determined officer, a career police officer who is determined to do this. So we will be doing this in the suburb. So if one morning you are in a suburb, you can't get out of the suburb, don't think it is that M2. Just know that it is the roadblock, I'm there. And because one of the problems is people complain, but when they get to the point and they found that we are doing a roadblock, they say, oh, Premier, it's you who has wasted our time. We are getting to work late. The police have shut down the place. And I say, you have been complaining to me that there's crime. You might be late to work, but we are sorting out the crime situation. Your area must be safe. So it's a two-way process. So crime and health, I will say. Crime, given what we have done well in this many other areas, the next big thing in Gauteng for me is to turn around crime, the crime and health, because all the other areas we have, there is light at the end of the tunnel. So that's what I will say, and I'm not going to wait. That's why I'm on crime issues. I'm not going to wait for somebody else at national and so on. I will be there with the police on the ground. We've got to arrest the people who are terrorizing communities in this province. And increasingly it will become safer. And we also want to see the police everywhere. When you drive around and you don't see a police vehicle, the chances of being stopped by someone and then being pushed off the road by someone, even during the day, it's true. What I see on the cameras about what's happening in the CBDs, where people are just robbing people at broad daylight, even with that, we have to put those people behind bars. But I must tell you, I'm very concerned that I think in some specific crimes, specific nationalities of foreign nationals are involved. In some specific crimes. Drugs, there's specific nationalities involved in drugs. Violent crimes and murders, including cash in transit heists, there's specific nationalities involved. To say this is not to make a particular nationality a problem. The police have to crack down. When they deal with drugs, you know how often do you find Nigerians involved in drugs? Do you know that? I know you citizens, when you know things, you keep quiet. We don't want to make Nigerians in general a problem, but we must ask the question, how do we have so many drug dens that are operated by Nigerians in our country? How does this happen? We've got to solve that problem. And we also have to make it a problem with Nigeria. Too many of your citizens are involved in this type of crime in our country. You remember I said with health we must collect the money? Yeah. If you vote for me to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I will go. I'll go to Nigeria.
I thought, Premier, this was not going to go there. You were on a good path.
Yes. To go to Nigeria and say, we are arresting too many of your citizens involved in this type of crime. It's not xenophobia. We work with that government to say, we've got to solve it. Your citizens are free to come to our country, but they contribute to a problem, a particular area of crime in our country. And we work with Nigerians, by the way. I can tell you, we work with Nigerians in the country to deal with drugs, to deal with the drug dens. The Nigerians who are legally here, who are not involved in those things, we do so with the others. Cash in transit heist, you must check who gets involved. Former soldiers in Zimbabwe and in Mozambique, without exception, former soldiers or former police officers. In cash in transit. So we must say to go back to our counterparts in those countries and say, we have citizens of your country who work with us. How do we clean up this area? We can't deal with crime by being too nice about it. Maybe that is my story today.
All right. Premier, thank you very much. You know, I didn't want to interrupt him, particularly in these last few minutes that he's been speaking, because I think he's said some really good things. And for me as a journalist, I think that's very important, to allow him to speak out. And that's what the Premier has done. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your participation this morning. And I want to thank my panel, the Premier of the Houghton Province, Mr. David Makura. Thanks indeed.
Thank you.
Finance MEC, Barbara Creasy. Thank you very much, MEC, for allowing us the time. And of course, Tasmia Ismail Saville. Thank you very much, the CEO of the Youth Employment Service. Thanks indeed.
You.
And I think there's some goodies behind there, so let's eat. Thank you very much. And thank you to the host, Professor Nicholas Lane. Thank you. And with that, we are officially shutting this down. And thank you, of course, to EMCA, who has broadcast this at some point. Thank you indeed.
Thank you, Oli.